I call it my control centre, but it's the bagging floor, because this is where the whole grain or wholemeal flour is actually bagged off at this level. So as I was talking about before, I've got what's called a tendering hook, which is this device here, and that's where the old saying being on tender hooks comes from.
All right.
Because millers religiously kept very vigilant about being somewhat positioned close to this device, because if there was a problem, that this was really the only device that they could use to raise the millstone quickly, to avoid any problems, or to reset the grind if necessary. So they were always somewhat very much on that, holding their hand on that during the mill.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the bridge tree assembly. This was sourced out of a mill from England, it's original. You can see the bedstone, vertical shafting, so I keep that well oiled, and I also manage the heat build up. You don't want the heat to be transferred into that whatsoever, so that's saying that you're running it too lean. So this is a governor that certainly does never ever control the speed of the mill. What it does, it allows the miller to have an automated device by which it can self-regulate and adjust on when the wind starts to pick up and the wind dies down. So what it does through these series of levers here in this pivot point, it will slightly lower the actual spindle shaft when these bolts throw out. So it's just increasing the load, and then when these die down, it slowly lifts. So it somewhat automates the consistency of the grind for the miller. Okay. I don't use it because the tolerance is probably about 1 thou from its full position out to down as to what it varies within the spindle shaft. So I have to control the grind to a degree much finer to get the quality of flour that I need out of this mill. So this is a thumb screw, and that's where the old saying thumb screw comes from. That was the device that I used to set the grain flow. And the miller would then inspect the flour, the whole grain flour, as it was coming through the flour chute.
Ah, right. So it's got a little...
like that is what I use. You bring it out and you rub it between your thumb and your forefingers, and that's where the old saying rule of thumb comes from. Because that thumb and the sensitivity that millers had in it, that really somewhat ruled his life. So a lot of millers would do nothing in the home sense, wouldn't chop wood or anything, for fear of damaging his sensitivity in that. Also, a lot of millers would wrap their thumb up in silk, bathed in whale oil years ago, just to preserve. Because that meant everything to him, so that ruled his life. So his whole credibility within the milling industry was reliant on how good he could feel the fineness. So they were very competitive years ago, actually. So yes, so this, once I've set the grind, I'll go up maybe 1 or 2 times in the early process of setting the grind. Then I generally spend all my time here. So obviously with wind milling, one of the downfalls is, what does wind do? It gusts, so it picks up and dies down all the time. So you've got to regulate the flow of the, well, what I do, I've perfected the art of actually preloading the mill to run it through wind gusts, as opposed to actually operating the cloth and changing the angle to increase and decrease the speed. So generally, if this was taught here, the wind was picking up, I could sense a wind gust coming in. You can watch the trees around you, you can hear the shudder. So what I would do, I'd give that a couple of flicks, and that puts about a half to a cupful of grain extra into the eye of the stone. So it preloads the mill to run it through those wind gusts at what would be considered a relative constant speed to what it was prior to the wind gust. So all you're doing is maintaining the revolution speed of the sails, which in turn will affect the grind, because if you don't do that, what you find in the whole mill, you can get layered through. Unlike in Holland, where generally they're very flat geographically, there's nothing to disturb the wind. The wind will go always at a constant speed. But here, because you've got trees, you've got hills, it will gust, it'll whip around. So it will on time stop, so you just have to go with it.